All right. A savior is rejected. Are we online? Has the computer stopped rejecting me? Are we here? Rejection is an awful feeling, and my Mac was rejecting me this morning. But she's better. She is awake. It's a little chilly. Can y'all hear me? Is everybody okay? I want to make sure the feed is good in case I have to completely do something differently. Let me know in the chat if you would, please. So, good morning. Glad you were here. Shalom Aleichem. Welcome to the Aliyah day this morning. Please be sure and like this video. I'm glad to know that it's working well. Baruch Hashem. Had a little bit of a minor glitch, but we're back. So glad you're here. And please be sure, as I said, like this video, share it with all of your friends. And if you're not yet subscribed to our channel, please be sure and do that. We would love to have you be a part of our community, to be a part of the movement that is known as Lapid Judaism. So welcome aboard. We are going to dive into our Aliyah today. We're going to be looking at a concept as it relates, obviously, to Moses, and that is the Messiah, the Savior, who is rejected. And I've talked about this at length, particularly as it related to Joseph and his brothers. You know, there's a concept within Judaism that when the Messiah comes, I'm just telling you right now, the way Jewish people think generally is that you know, when the Messiah comes, you know, there's going to be just amazing joy, amazing universal amongst Jews, universal acceptance. It'll be crystal clear that he's the Moshiach, and you know, it'll be a utopia. The problem with that is that according to Jewish literature, ancient Jewish literature about the Messiah, that is not true. Okay. According to ancient Jewish literature about the Messiah, Midrashim and so forth, we're going to reject the Messiah. We're not going to love him. And in fact, he's going to die. Okay. We talked about that before as well. I've mentioned this recently, that if you are a Jewish person and you do not yet believe that Yeshua is the Messiah, I mean, I get it. You know, that's fine. We can have that conversation. And I'm talking here specifically about Yeshua, the Mashiach, not the JC of Christianity, because I agree with you. If you're a Jewish person, the JC of Christianity isn't the Messiah, and no, they're not the same. And I 100% agree with you on that. So I'll high five you on that all day long. But having said that, just know one thing I want you to know. Number one is that whoever the Messiah is going to be, if you don't believe it's Yeshua, which it is, but putting that aside, that Mashiach will come and will die. So just know that, believe that, trust that, and that Mashiach will be raised to new life, 100%. If you believe the Jewish teachings about the Mashiach, the Jewish teachings about the Mashiach. Now, I didn't say the gospel teachings. I said, you know, Midrash, Rabbah, Zohar, Talmud, etc. Okay, Talmudic stuff, you know, whatever. Really more midrashic and Kabbalistic, but anyway, that's not to split hairs here. But the point is that that's the reality. And the reality is that the Mashiach is not going to be accepted. Now, I said that this is, when we look at Jewish literature, this is what it says about the Mashiach. But also with respect to Yishana Adaya, I presume you made it back to North Carolina safe and sound. So glad that hope that's the case. It looks like it is. So glad you're here. Miss you, come back soon. Why'd you even leave? But anyway, I digress. But when you look at the pattern, as we looked at the pattern of the various redeemers, there really isn't a redeemer, a messianic figure in Judaism that we did not reject. Now, the four that come to mind, really five, but the fifth one doesn't really count because that one. Thinking in my mind is really Noach, but can't really say there's Jews necessarily at that time. That was kind of the proto-Jewish world. But in any case, there are 4 redeemers in Israel, and we've rejected every one of them. The first, of course, was Joseph. The second was Moses. You know, the third, right, would be you know, King David. You know, the brothers rejected Joseph, and you know, the brothers rejected Moses, right? And then, of course, the people rejected David. A lot of people don't realize that, but King David uh, was not necessarily accepted by the people. So these are the redeemers. I think I said 4. I think I meant 3. The three big ones. These are the redeemers who were rejected. And here we are looking now at the story of Moses. I want to share with you kind of an insight. So when you're looking, or a new perspective on this, in this particular portion, the Aliyah, the third Aliyah of Shemot, a book of Exodus that we were talking about today, it comes from Exodus chapter 2 and verse 11, and it goes over to let's see where it ends. Yeah, it ends. Yeah, it goes all the way to the end of chapter 2. So the fourth Aliyah picks up again in chapter 3. In this Aliyah, what we learn is Moses is growing up in Pharaoh's home. He goes out to visit his brothers periodically. He sees that they're being abused. He observes that a Egyptian man is beating a Hebrew. He kills the Egyptian. And I'm sure you can imagine that Moses is thinking to himself, this is great. I have defended my people. I am in a position in which I can do that because I'm a prince of Egypt. And they're going to think that's awesome. Later, he observes 2 Hebrew men that are engaged in an altercation. And he went to break up the fighting. It says here in the scripture, he said to the wicked one, "Why would you strike your fellow?" And he replied, "Who appointed you as a dignitary, a ruler, and a judge over us?" Boom. Do you propose to murder me as you murdered the Egyptian? Moses was frightened, and he thought, indeed, the matter is known. Pharaoh heard about this matter and sought to kill Moses. So Moses fled from before Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian. He sat by a well. Now, we're going to talk about today his marriage and meeting and so forth to Zipporah, because Zipporah spiritually, Kabbalistically, metaphorically, allegorically, mystically plays a significant role in this entire story. But most people barely even know who Zipporah was, aside from Mrs. Munster. But but looking back, some of y'all will get that in a second. So you're like, Mrs. Munster. Some of you will get that, and if you get that, you're going to earn 20 extra points on the end of the year Aliyah Day final examination. All right. So going back to this story, this is a beautiful, amazing pattern that is shown to us about the Moshiach. The Moshiach has come to his people. He saved somebody by killing an Egyptian. Now he's trying to be the mediator in good faith to bring shalom between 2 brothers or 2 people, not necessarily brothers, well, brothers in faith anyway. And so he breaks up the argument. He's trying to bring shalom. and they reject him. Who made you ruler over us? Who made you the boss of me, boy? Who said that you were anything to us? You going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? I mean, totally rejected him. And then the other, so in this case, the Jewish people reject him. And then what happens? Now Pharaoh, he grew up in Pharaoh's house. Pharaoh heard that he killed an Egyptian. And now Pharaoh wants to kill him. So now he's rejected by both Jew and Gentile, kind of like Yeshua, who was rejected by, the wicked Jews, the wicked, I said Jews, it's really the Sadducees. I was going to say the wicked Jewish leaders, but really the Sadducees. They turn him over to the Gentiles, the Romans, and what the Romans want to kill him too. Please don't think that, the Romans didn't really want to kill him. Yes, they did. Romans don't care about anybody. Now, this story, here's the nuance I wanted to introduce to you. Because here is an interesting idea. Now, remember that Moses is a prince of Egypt. He's, have been brought up by the daughter of Pharaoh. He lives in the royal house. Now, typically and traditionally, I mean, it's just kind of a thing within the royal world, I guess, particularly in antiquity. And if you're a prince or a king or somebody in rulership, you can pretty much kill whoever you want to kill. I mean, there's not a whole lot of due process when it comes, to royals. You offend the prince and you're going to die. Pretty much is the way it's going to happen. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, from my point of view, in my opinion, the idea that Pharaoh heard about this matter and sought to kill Moses, my question is why? Pharaoh hears that Moses killed an Egyptian, and why'd you kill him? Well, he wasn't doing, he was doing something improper, and I believe he deserved the death penalty. Okay. I mean, you're a royal, so anybody else you'd like to kill this morning? Could you pass the eggs? I mean, really, it's not like a big deal. However, if I share with you a nuance of this story that I'm going to imagine you probably haven't thought of before, now it makes more sense. Here's the nuance of the story. Now, when you watch movies like the Ten Commandments, by the way, did anybody get the Mrs. Munster little side haha? Anybody know what I'm talking about at all? 20 points, extra credit. Okay, let me know if you did. So when you see the movies like Ten Commandments, which is a great movie, I really, really love Ten Commandments. And then you see other movies like the animated movie, which was pretty good, had a great soundtrack, called The Prince of Egypt. Remember that one? Well, when you see that movie, or those movies, those depictions, I think that pretty much universally, the story is depicted in such that Moses grows up in Pharaoh's home and nobody knows he's a Hebrew. Right? Is that pretty much, will you agree with me? That's generally the concept, that nobody knows he's a Hebrew. He grows up in the household, and then maybe Moses himself doesn't even know he's a Hebrew. And then somehow he finds out, and then that leads him to start wanting to learn more about his people, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Anybody? I think that's pretty much accurate. The way in which it's you typically portrayed. However, that's not the way that the ancient Jewish literature depicts how things went down. And to me, this is actually makes more sense, and it creates another pattern and another explanation. Why did, generally speaking, why did the Jewish people reject Moshiach Yeshua? Is it true, by the way, that all Jews rejected the Messiah? No Jews except, well, of course not. How do we know that? Well, because the Gospels were written by, I don't know, Jews. So clearly, the Jewish people did not universally reject Yeshua in the same way that the Jewish people did not universally reject Joseph or Moses or David, or for that matter, King Solomon. You could say that King Solomon was a funny, a fourth rather candidate. But putting that aside, what actually happened is that Pharaoh knew that Moses was a Hebrew child. Yes, Keturah, that is true, and you are the first to get the 20 points on your final exam. Pharaoh knew that Moses was a Hebrew boy. It's brought down on the Kel Tumash that he had hoped that he would be able to take this Hebrew child and turn him into an Egyptian, which is the hope of all the despots in history. This is the hope of the Babylonians. This is why Zake and Rayford talked about it with the king's meat. Nebuchadnezzar hoped that he could turn Daniel into a Babylonian. Antiochus Epiphanes hoped that he could turn the Jews into Greeks. The Rome and the Christians still today hope that they can turn Jews into Christians. They desperately want that to happen. They loved Israel. They love Jews as long as we're not Jewish. They want very much to, and I'm not even kidding you right now. They would love to have Christmas trees all over Jerusalem during December 25th. Why? Because that would mean that Jews are Christians worshiping this JC, the Savior. I'm not even kidding now. They would love that. And so the Pharaoh wanted Moses to be an Egyptian. So the point I'm trying to make here is Pharaoh knew that he was an Egyptian child. And the scriptures really kind of indicate that. There's nothing in there that goes, they had no idea. It doesn't even suggest that Moses didn't know who he was. So Moses knew that he was a Hebrew living in the palace, and he probably thought to himself, much like Joseph did, hey, I've been brought to the kingdom for such a time as this. I'm in a good position to be the arbiter of my people. Look, I'm going to save them from somebody who is mistreating them, and then I'm going to come in and be their mediator, their judge. And what did they do? They rejected him. Now, you can imagine from the people's point of view, there's probably a lot of jealousy going on. In fact, we learn from the sources that Dathan and Abiram are the ones who actually are going to out Moses. They're the same ones who got involved in the Koach rebellion later. There's lots of jealousy. Listen, jealousy is a powerful motivator. Trust me. Trust me. I've experienced this in my life. It's unfortunate that there are people who will come after you, and they'll come at you with viciousness. Some of them are people that used to be really, really close to you, and they're simply just jealous. They want your stuff. They want your deal. They want to be you. Some people can get really obsessed with you, by the way. But you know what? That's just, I've learned that, that's not fun, but it's also life. These people are probably super jealous of Moses. I mean, here they are, they're slaves having to do, slave things. And he's a Hebrew and he gets to live in the palace. So you can see the picture here is jealousy. This is why there's a rejection of him. They're jealous of him. This also helps us to make sense why it says when Pharaoh heard about this matter of him killing the Egyptian, he sought to kill Moses. Now it makes sense. Why? Because Pharaoh's whole point was to make Moses an Egyptian. And now Moses is showing some level of fraternity with the Hebrews, with the Jews. And this has frustrated Pharaoh's plans. And so now the best thing to do is to kill him. Because why? Because people like Pharaoh or the Romans or what have you, or the Christians, they're completely awesome with you as long as you're theirs. Rebbe and I were talking about this in our early years of this ministry before we had the means with which to purchase a building. We rented from Christian churches, and we counted there were like 5 different denominations that through the years, that we rented a room from, or so forth. And and we were the wandering Jews for quite a while. And we were talking about this yesterday, that it was strange how those all ended up weird. And I won't get into it, but it was clearly anti-Semitism. There was really, because there was no interaction between us aside from the initial agreement. You know, these were small congregations, and so we never saw their people; they never saw us. But by the end of it all, it was just this weird kind of, at best, kind of a uncomfortable, awkward relationship. And we're like, what's going on? And I think the answer to that was that. And because I've analyzed this through the years, looking at each situation, I think at first, when we show up, it's like, oh, look, these are Jews who believe in JC, although we don't, but that's what they think. And they're like, awesome. And then somewhere along the way, they pay attention to who we are, and they find out that we're not kidding. Like, we really are Jews who practiced Judaism. Rabbinic Judaism. Yeah, we believe in the Yeshua, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you're a Jew and you believe in Yeshua and you're practicing Judaism, that's still a problem. Trust me, guys. I'm not even kidding you right now. It's a problem. This is why when you go to Messianic congregations, I'm just have to be honest with you. You know, I thought about this yesterday. I kind of wish I was like Mr. Spock, because I have a lot of things that I need to say that are just facts, but everybody gets so emotional, and I get it, right? Even though it's a fact, it still hurts your feelings. But I wish I was like Mr. Spock, and therefore you would understand that I have no emotion. I speak logic and fact like a robot, and therefore you can't get mad at me because I'm Spock. So just think of me as Spock, okay? So this is why when you go to Messianic congregations, there is no Torah observance. They believe in Yeshua, but there's no Torah observance. Now, as a Gentile, you might think there are, but as a Jew, I can tell you it's zero, zilch, nada. You just don't know what to look for or what to not look for, but we do, and I get it. It's not your fault. There's no Torah observance there. Zero. Zilch, nada. Why? Because you can be a Jew and believe in Yeshua, but you can't be a Jew and practice Torah. That's the problem. You're supposed to be an Egyptian. This is why he wanted to kill Moses. He wanted to kill Moses because his plan had failed. And so, since the plan failed, might as well kill the child. Of course, he's not a child now, he's a man. But still. So Moses goes off to the wilderness. Now he's a savior rejected. Can you imagine what Moses must be thinking? My goodness, I was saved supernaturally. In fact, there's a statement here. Where is it? Isn't it the Kehot, or is it here? Yes, here it is. We talked about this yesterday, but in verse 6 of chapter 2, let me find verse 6 right quick. In verse 6 of chapter 2, it says, Vetiftach vetirehu et hayeled vehine naar bakeh vetachmol alav vetomer milyade ha'ivrim ze. So it says here in that verse, by the way, is she opened it and saw him, the child, okay? Vatiftach vetirehu et hayeled. So I want to focus in on the et hayeled. She saw it, the child, and behold, a youth was crying. She took pity upon him, and she said, Vetomer miade ha'ivrim ze. This is a Hebrew child. Now, Rabbi Monk brings down a very interesting insight when it says here, the literal interpretation is that she saw the child. However, because of the unusual repetition construct, the Midrash interprets that she saw the Shekinah, that is the divine presence, hovering over the child. This is hinted at in the text by the silent preposition et chayeled, aleph tav chayeled, which can be translated with, indicating that she saw something else with the child. The sages or the commentators bring down that et, the olive top, represents something that is there but not seen. That is not clearly known. So in other words, she opens the basket. Remember the word basket is tevat, and it means ark. She opens the ark in order to find the child, which represents the word of God, and hovering over this child is the Shekinah of God. So here's Moses. He knows that of course, we talked about yesterday that when he was born, the home was filled with light. So he knows he's chosen. He knows he's special. He knows that the fact that he ended up in the palace is unbelievable, obviously supernatural. And yet he's been rejected by his brethren. The Midrash comments that Moses was to grow up right in the heart of the very kingdom that he would subsequently overthrow, just as the Messiah will rise from the midst of a kingdom which he is destined to punish. Where is the Moshiach right now? Where do the rabbis say the Moshiach is right now? The gates of Rome. What does Rome represent in ancient Jewish literature? Christianity. And I know this is going to come as a shock. This is my Mr. Spock moment. The Moshiach is destined to destroy Christianity. I know that's a shocker. I know that many of you who watch this program, who found me just this morning, are thinking, what? And I'm telling you right now, yep. It's okay. I didn't say that he's destroying your salvation. I didn't say that you're not going to be part of the kingdom. I didn't say that you're not going to be part of the covenant people when you go through conversion. I didn't say that he's not your redeemer and he's not bringing you atonement. I said he's destroying a religion that is false. 100%. 100%. Do you think when Mashiach shows up, he's going to go to First Baptist? No offense to Baptist. I could say the same thing. First Pentecostal, First Methodist, pick your poison. I don't even care. You think he's going to go to the First Church of the Whosoevers, sit down and eat pork at Sunday brunch? You crazy? Of course he's not. So you can imagine Moses' thinking. He's like, what gives? So he ends up going to the wilderness. Now, there's some interesting concepts about this with respect to him going to the wilderness and becoming the king of Ethiopia for a while and becoming a great general there. There's really interesting insights related to that. But I wanted to pick up on this story really quickly of how, well, he meets Zipporah and ends up marrying her. Okay. And Rabbi Monk has some really interesting insights with respect to Zipporah and the meaning of this marriage. Let me check something out here right quick before I go any further. I feel like I left something on the table with the kale too much. I want to make sure that I didn't say something or forget something I wanted to say. If I did, can always add it later. All right, we'll come to that tomorrow. That's actually a better message for tomorrow. All right, so it says here, first of all, let me give you a brief story. And this is also interesting. This is brought down to you by the Legends of the Jews. So there was a rod that belonged to I'm gonna give you the short version here. This rod, this staff, the staff that would eventually become the staff of Moses, whereby he would use to affect the plagues. This staff belonged to Adam, and God made it out of sapphire. It has the divine name on it, as well as the names of the plagues. It was given to Adam, and it eventually made its way through a series of circumstances to the garden of Jethro. Now, if you have the Legends of the Jews, the 2-volume set, what I'm reading to you is on page 494 and 495. So it made it to Jethro's garden. Anybody ever heard of the sword and the stone story? King Arthur, sword and the stone. Whoever pulls the sword out of the stone will be king. Yeah, I don't know if a Jewish person came up with that story or not, but probably based on what I'm about to say here. So it says here that this sapphire, supernatural, by the way, heavenly of heavenly origin staff, ended up in the garden of Jethro, plucked into the ground or stuck into the ground, and nobody could move it. People would come and they would want to marry one of his daughters. And his deal was, if you can remove this staff and give it to me, then you can have one of my daughters in marriage. And of course, nobody's been able to do it. So it says here that she ushered in Moses. You know, he told Zipporah, go get this man who saved you at the well and bring him in. Moses requested that he marry Zipporah. So Moses, evidently, he looked at Zipporah and said, you know, all right, I think I'd like to have her marriage. Jethro replied, if you can bring me the rod in my garden, I will give her to you. So Moses went out, found the sapphire rod that God had bestowed upon Adam when he was driven forth from paradise. So now we have a connection here. Adam was driven forth from paradise. Now Moses has been driven forth from, well, paradise. So Moses is representing an Adam-like. So there's a pattern here. The Redeemer is likened to Adam. The rod that had reached Jethro after manifold vicissitudes, and he had planted it in his garden, Moses uprooted it and carried it to Jethro, who conceived an idea at once that he was the prophet in Israel concerning all whom the wise men of Egypt had foretold that he would destroy their land and its inhabitants. As soon as this thought struck him, he seized Moses and threw him into a pit in the expectation that he would meet with death there. So Jethro was, when he got the rod, he realized this is more than just he wants to marry my daughter. Because he was able to take up the rod of Adam, that means he's the Redeemer. I'm going to throw him into the pit. So now we have Jethro who is rejecting the Messiah. Now, so far, the messianic figure here has been rejected by the Jews, by the Gentiles, and now by Jethro, who's also a Gentile, pagan, so forth. You could make the argument, I think, in a roundabout way. It's not exactly a pure argument, but I think you could make the argument that Jethro might represent maybe the Muslims, if you will, if you wanted to use that. Although it's not exactly, that's thin, I admit, but still. But so the story goes on that he's in the pit for 7 years. Now, who else was in a pit? Who else was in a pit? Joseph. So Joseph represents the Messiah, suffering Messiah, Moshiach ben Yosef. Here, Moses represents the Messiah, son of David, the one who will actually effect redemption. Remember, Joseph led us into exile. Moses is leading us out of exile. It's interesting to me that in Jewish texts, they both come up from a pit. What is this trying to teach us? It's trying to teach us that the two messiahs will ultimately be one and the same. They will have the same source. Joseph was rejected. They threw him in a pit. Moses is now rejected. He ends up being thrown into a pit. And Zipporah keeps him alive by feeding him and so forth. And Zipporah goes to her father one day and finally says, look, it's been 7 years. If he's actually alive, then you have to know that he must be the chosen of God, because nobody who wasn't chosen and didn't have a purpose could survive this long. So go to the pit. If he's there, and he's dead, then pull him out of the pit so that his corpse doesn't stink up our house. If he's alive, then I think you need to make tshuva. That's essentially what she's saying. That was the short Rabbi Griffin version. So it says, all right, the reply of Joseph was, you have spoken wisely. Do you remember his name? He had forgotten his name. Isn't that an interesting pattern? Jethro forgot what he was actually called. And Zipporah rejoined him and said, I remember. He called himself Moses, the son of Amram. So now Zipporah is remembering his actual name. Isn't that interesting? Jethro lost no time. He opened the pit and called out, Moses, Moses. Moses replied and said, here I am. Jethro drew him up out of the pit, kissed him, and said, blessed be God who granted you for these 7 years, who guarded you these 7 years in the pit. I acknowledge that he slays and he revives, and that you are the one wholly pious, and that through you, God will destroy Egypt in a time soon to come, and lead his people out of the land, and drown Pharaoh and his whole army into the sea. Wow. Now, one final thing as we conclude today. You see the patterns here? The patterns are, I mean, how do you look at this and then look at the life of Yeshua and go, yeah, no way he's the guy. How is that even possible? When I've said this before, the other rabbis that are believed to be Mashiach figures have done none of this. Zero. Zilch. The only thing that qualifies them to be a Messiah is that they were Jews. That's pretty much it. And that's not even really a qualifier. I mean, it is, but then again, it isn't. So it says, looking at Zipporah, though, one last thing here. A more mystical approach. This is Rabbi Monk, by the way, going back to Rabbi Monk. This morning, I know people I don't always clarify which sources I'm necessarily using. I just how I roll, but people often ask. So this morning, in case you're wondering, I've read some insights today from the Kale Tumash, from the Legends of the Jews, and from the Call of the Torah by Rabbi Monk. And so here it is. A more mystical approach is developed by Maharal, who notes that the man Moses was symbolically equal in stature to the entire people of Israel, and he was therefore he was therefore an entity separate unto himself. So what does this teach? What's another pattern here? That all the souls are rooted in the Messiah. That's what Judaism teaches about the Moshiach. And so therefore, when you have rabbis who correctly say that Isaiah 53 is about the suffering servant, and that suffering servant on the Peshat level is Israel, but on the Kabbalistic level is absolutely the Moshiach. And that's what Judaism teaches. Okay. Well, you say, how can these two things be the same? And the answer is because in Moshiach is the root soul of all Jews. Just like in Moses, he represented all of Israel and therefore was an entire entity unto himself. Therefore, the suffering Messiah, Israel, is the Messiah because all Jews are ultimately in the Moshiach. The sages teach Kabbalistically that it's almost like the Messiah's soul was shattered, and those shards are you and I. And therefore, when we come back together, we therefore make a tikkun for the soul of Mashiach. So it says, thus, it was necessary for his wife to be from outside the nation. Listen to this. This is the importance of Zipporah. For all of you out there who are converts to Judaism or will be converts to Judaism, spiritually, everybody says, I want to be like Ruth. That's a great example. Nothing wrong with that. I want to add another name to that. I want to say Zipporah. And here's what it says. Thus, it was necessary for his wife to be from outside the nation so that she could bring him to the fulfillment of his leadership capacity in her destined role as Ezer Kenegdo, a helpmate by his side. So it's saying here that Moses represents all of Israel, all the Jews. In fact, he's like an entity unto himself. In order to fulfill his mission, however, he has to be joined with a woman who comes from a non-Jewish root. Now, the Zipporah goes through conversion. So she's not a Gentile because a Jew can't marry a Gentile. Period. I'm a Jewish man, for sure. So Zipporah goes through conversion, but look what it says. In this regard, Zipporah, daughter of the greatest theologian of that era, was well suited to Moses, its greatest prophet. Their marriage enabled non-Jews to share in the true faith, the belief in one God, but to achieve this symbolic objective, the woman had to be a convert to Jewish faith. For converts have a strength of conviction that surpasses that of other believers. Kiddushin 70b. Remember that believer is a term for Jewish people in general. It was co-opted, like everything else, by Christians, but a believer is a Jew. Are you a believer? Yes, I'm Jewish. What? Exactly. In fact, the Midrash tells us that she was the same moral and spiritual level as the matriarchs Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Wow. He had to marry a convert to Judaism so that through her spiritual nature, more converts could be drawn from the nations. That is a pattern with which we will close our Aliyah. End of our Aliyah. Thank you so much for being here today. It's been a blessing to be with you. I bless you today. Please be sure and like this video. Share it with all of your friends. There is a dam that is about to burst forth, and many souls are going to be coming into Lapid Judaism. We're right on the edge of it. It is so close. I can smell it in the air. So please be sure and share all of this with your friends. They are dying to hear it. They are in a desert, dying of thirst. They may not even know it. So look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, have a great, amazing, and wonderful day.